If you want to end, she mentioned for us to wait outside, so.
We're live.
Right there. Bush.
No.
She runs
Well, hello.
Morning.
So.
Ready?
You do. Good. My police are tallied.
Mr. Fry, will you be your chair this month?
I'd be happy to. I either need a paper packet or if I can get logged in.
I didn't even, online, I didn't see one. Did I miss the attachment or
Okay.
I didn't say, hi, Mike.
Hey,
They're live.
How are you?
good, how are you doing?
Thank you so much. Did anybody? That's always online. Is he? I don't see him yet.
Yeah, I heard him call it and then I don't know if he's not showing up. Lake's on as well, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, hi, good morning.
Morning. Morning, Lake. Do we have a quorum?
We do.
Okay. All right, so let's call this meeting to order. Let's take, if you would mind taking a roll call. Who's here?
Member Fry,
Present?
Member Bissell,
Here,
Member Green,
Here.
Member Fitzgerald,
Here.
and Member Bicknell is asked to be excused.
Okay,
We do have a quorum.
thank you. Do we have anything, request for public comment?
I have not received anything.
Okay. I need a motion to approve the agenda for today's meeting. Oh, actually, I'm just gonna I'll do consent all in one swipe. Motion to approve the consent agenda today. Okay, move. Second. All in favor? Aye.
I,
Thanks, Lake. Consent agenda is approved. So then we'll move on down to action items. Mike, future location of library.
Okay, thank you. I'll introduce this and then I'll turn you over to Rural Library District Room Director Ann Romero and then one of their board members, Austin Archer. I'll give you a little introduction to this. So as you all know, we have that community center building down at Lions Park. And while we've been successful to take in grants for the renovation of said park, and that's going to happen all next year, the EDA grant we filed wasn't successful, but we still mid to long term want to continue to get grants and so forth to replace that, because otherwise you're going to have a pretty significant mismatch of a really sharp looking park and a really old building. And then also tangentially, same time this is going on back in Austin in August 2019. The city voters voted into rural library district under auspices of getting a branch in town. Right now there's an in-room one over at Meadowbrook Plaza, but it was always the intention midterm to establish a headquarters with a permanent looking branch in the city limits. The library does own property over on College Avenue adjacent to the high school. However, given the fact we're at the start of when you would put in legislative appropriations, I had a meeting with their board about the concept of, is that the best site, or is there a way essentially through combining forces with the city and the library to actually replace the community center with a hybrid community center library? So that way we could share resources and really get a nice looking building there. Plus it's on bus routes, and that's gonna be a major focal point anyway, once that park is renovated. We're gonna be working with them on filing a legislative appropriation, at least do a site analysis and architecture plans, but toward the end of the year. But the big issue is that when you file those, you need to say where you're putting the thing, and you can't really go back on it after you put the site. So there's some key decisions that have to be made here about whether they go on that site adjacent to the school, or if they go at Lions Park. If they go at Lions Park, naturally, since city council looks to this board for the advisory recommendations, you're going to be making the advisory recommendation, and then council would vote on allowing that. And as I said, because of that legislative appropriation timeline, at least for putting in which address, we're on a fairly stringent timeline to figure this out. So with that,
Yeah, thank you, Mike.
yeah.
So I'm Romero, Executive Director for the County Library, Vice Chair Austin Archer, for the Board of Trustees. And like Mike has said, we are here trying to get your feedback, or at least your interest in co-locating at either one of our existing location on College Avenue, or possibly partnering to co-share the building and construction costs, as well as the overhead on your College Place property, your Lions Park.
Yeah,
property,
Lions Park.
that you plan on demolishing and revamping. So we're willing to be co-locators, and we're here to try to determine if all stakeholders would be interested in pursuing a vision together that would determine how this partnership would look in terms of funding, agreements, and anything else that would need to be developed in terms and conditions, possibly a contract. But we're just here gathering interest at the moment.
So how do you see how that building, I think, I'm trying to visualize, how the space would be utilized for both. Do you have a kind of an idea how that might look?
So in talking with Mike, I believe the current conceptual plans that he showed me, there's a plan for the 5,000 square foot
Yeah.
building.
Correct, and keep in mind, because we petitioned National Park Service, so they actually have the legal right to have a building there, and they finally accepted that. We do have the ability to go up and down, so I mean, if we combine, we could do a multi-story building, and that immediate part of the park is not in a floodway or a floodplain. So that would allow us to do that hypothetically.
Right. So what we were thinking is we would come in and add to that 5,000 square foot plan that Mike has shown us, by either going up or down. The way that we envision utilizing that space is the location will be primarily library space. And we could either be downstairs, upstairs, but primarily the main blueprint would be library.
So we have, so one floor would be library, one floor would be,
So 5,000 square feet, or approximately between 4 to 5, or whatever. we would-
But yeah,
So it could be 10 if you need to.
yeah, 5 floor, and hypothetically, there is a split. When we went through that painful process, they have the ability of the building already at the park approved. hypothetically, we did carve out a 10,000 like square foot square that takes into effect the building, a little bit of the grass around it and some of the parking lots. So hypothetically, there is the ability to expand the footprint a little bit as well from a legal perspective. Yeah, there would be nothing precluding it from going up or down. But this is just in front of you because if we're gonna be trying to get legislative money, we're gonna have to say where the thing is going.
Yeah. So one of the wonders I have from a school district perspective is, one of the things that we were wondering, and I won't even speak for Troy, who's a board member, just internally in the district office and some of the buildings there, of course, they were high school and a middle school.
Sure.
Is if that building were to take shape on its current spot in College Ave, how we might partner.
And that has been a conversation. So either location that we choose, we are interested in co-locating with potential business partners, including the school district. I believe like 2 weeks ago, and I know that you're on summer break, but I reached out via email to potentially have that conversation with the school district first. But either location, obviously, we will work with the City of College Place at the Lions Park. But we have been in discussion with other board members in terms of the school district at the other location.
And just to throw it out to the board, and I even gave a little verbal comment of this at their board meeting, there's really a very diverse pro and con list at both sites, depending where you're like aiming for. So I mean, as far as the College Avenue site, that is our future growth area. And that is like at the southern end of Main Street. However, as far as other besides the school, there isn't like a park right there, so you don't have that built-in amount of people going constantly like I think Lions Park is gonna have once that's once that's completely renovated and such. Lions Park and there's nothing on the site on College Avenue, so building it would be a much more linear process. Because there isn't a building, so you wouldn't have to go through beyond the funding, the asbestos removal, because that community center is from 1960s. So once you tear that thing down, who knows what you're gonna find in it. So you have that on the outside. On the Lions Park side, if as far as the location of it, it is in the middle of the community on the bus route, on the local bike routes, farmers markets right there. And then the renovations, I think that's going to put an insane amount of folks in that park at all times. The issue of my only unknown with that is what I just said about the demolition of that building, because there's very limited paperwork on what was built out there. From what I can tell, it looked like volunteers built most of it in the 60s. So, you demolish stuff like that. Once you're in, and depending on if ecology gets involved or who knows, that could mess up the process. I would say longer term, like if you exclude all of that would probably be a more powerful site because of the amount of renovations occurring adjacent to it. However, that unknown part could also mess with the timeline as well. So there's very distinct pros and cons with both of these sites, but it's up for any action really just to try to garner. If the recommendation is to pursue Lions Park, or if the recommendation is to go with what the original plan was over at the site adjacent to the school district.
A couple things that, as a question, what then happens with the property, if they're, if you get partnering with the city and attaching it to Lions Park, what then happens with the property that exists there? Just as maybe the first question.
Right, At the last meeting, the board did discuss that question, and the intention would be to continue to hold on to that property for future library district growth.
My other, or rather, just a comment.
Yes.
I came from a community where the primary library was located adjacent to one of the major parks in the city. And it certainly created its own draw and just atmosphere to it as well. I do think that there's something more inviting, in terms of inclusion, about having it attached to a park, especially when it's being so substantially renovated like this, and where we have the farmers market located as well. I think it has the ability to draw more people in than it might the other location, both because of proximity to the main part of town, but also just because of, what is or isn't out there currently. Obviously, as neighborhood growth continues, there's potential for, that to be a good thing for the library, as houses potentially wrap around it. But I think for the time being, I think it's a fantastic idea and a way to move a project forward that I think is great for the city anyway. That building certainly needs some love, and it would certainly be the topper for that park to be renovated in that way. And it seems like a big win to me.
So a couple questions I have. Do you think that we have the parking capacity with both operating sort of simultaneously? Is there any opportunity? I'm sure I know that the road there that's 8 that extends to cul-de-sac is like an emergency outlet of the villages there.
Yeah.
Is there any possibility that could become, parking? I'm thinking like, angled parking along there, and keeping some access. I just feel like it might potentially in sort of certain times be pretty overwhelming. When you have the farmers market, you got parking up and down Larch, which kind of impedes, traffic flow. Is there any possibility of shifting that block of 8?
Hypothetically, there is, because back when we carved out the square for the community center, I also petitioned National Park Service to remove 8, because don't ask me why, but when all that property was essentially bought up in the 1960s and the National Park Service database, it also showed the property of that road as being like on protected ground, or hypothetically that wasn't supposed to be there either. So when we went through the process of removing the building from the protected ground, we also did it with all the right of way. So technically there is the ability to, I believe, put in diagonal, and furthermore, if we had to, even bump the southern curb line a little bit, and if it was better to accommodate the diagonal park. And so the full right of way was deducted from that protection. But
Okay. Then my other question is really about the existing site of the, how is that zoned?
commercial.
So obviously one of my concerns, I hear you say that you're gonna hold on to it, but
no.
if you were to perhaps change your mind, that impacts us. Right, that's right next door to our main buildings, and so we'd be having interest in sort of what that becomes. Because if it's if it's something that's a magnet for children, it could be anything. It could be a gas station that has mini marts that we have, or it could be, then that we would have an interest in what that would look like. So, I one of the things that we talked about, is that, and I'll just bring it up, that the potential for a joint library with our schools there is could have been an idea, that, and even some of the meeting spaces, if you added some conference rooms and things that I think are always kind of at a premium in buildings. So that's something that we had thought if that came along, that we might be wanting to talk about. I certainly think, I mean, I agree with you that that location makes it a hub of the community versus sort of where it is a little bit kind of out of bounds for, you know, of just kind of the main thoroughfare of town, so.
I think it becomes maybe an extension of the school almost rather than its own draw.
Yeah,
Not that it's a bad thing, just.
Yeah, it's one of those things to struggle with, because I definitely think the park down by the high school, mid to long term, is gonna be a lot more active as Craig's property gets developed. I mean, that thing was officially bought, so I mean, that's a done deal. It's just, I would say in the shorter to midterm, because of all the programming that's occurred out at Lions Park over the last several years, that's like developed like a aura of its own almost. And I think the city of Jordan's reference is actually one where I used to work at, which is where I got the idea from, which is Beaver.
Yeah, Hillsborough does it too.
Yeah.
Both cities have the same setup.
Yeah, because they have their park, they have their farmers market, and then they put the library right in the middle of the park, and it drew a ton of people. So I mean, as I said, each one has a very distinct flavor to it, but we're trying to make sure, because I get contacted by residents a lot from when they voted this in about the promise of the permanent library. So that's why I met with them, making sure that was staying on a pathway. But now in order to keep it on the pathway, we need your guidance as far as which site that the appropriation is going to be tied to.
Mike, could I ask a question here? Interject for a second. Mike, what were the communities that you'd mentioned you've seen this model work in?
Beaverton, Oregon specifically.
Oh, Beaverton.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, and there was one other community that had it similar. What was the other community?
Shoot Park in Hillsborough, Oregon is the same.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Okay, so Hillsborough and Beaverton.
Yeah.
Okay. And have we discussed like thoroughly the cons of having it over near the high school or near the school? Are there significant cons, or are we just looking for the advantage of possibly putting it at Lions?
Oh, I discussed the cons some. I mean, just to quickly go over it, I would say the cons of the College Avenue site is at least where the community-wide activity point is it's either further north on College Avenue or out at Lions Park. Not to say it couldn't become an activity node in the future, but at least from the community-wide standpoint, not yet. So there is that. And then also, but then the con of the Lions Park site is mainly what's built out there. So that's an older building from the 60s we have no plans on. So once you start demolishing it, if stuff gets found, you're basically held captive to it, and that can mess with your schedule for building something. So I mean, that's really the con to it. I would say the minor con with Lions Park may be a perception of parking, but I think with properly dealing with it on the southeast 8th, since it's a cul-de-sac, and I bike out there all the time. I mean, even during farmers market, while the north lot gets filled up quite a bit, that south lot across the creek typically has ample park, and it's just people don't want to walk across the bridge. It's not that it's not that there's no parking. It's more so I want to be right there and walk 20 feet.
And I'll add too, I think part of why it becomes street parking is that far side across the street has shade on those hot evenings where the lot doesn't. And so people choose to park over there to get out of the sun. Because I've been there where even the main lot had several spots still open, but people were choosing to park on that far side where they could shade.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really the cons with both. I mean, the cons with College Avenue is more so existence of where the node of community-wide activity center is. The main con with Lions Park is that it's a can of, that building frankly is gonna be a can of worms once you start demolishing that, and I can't guarantee where that will go and who will get involved too, because yeah. Ecology's a funny beast that way.
Well, I would be interested in getting a little more familiar with what Beaverton and Hillsborough have done with their facilities. I think in terms of what I see over in Richland, where they do have a pretty developed community system that's kind of near the river, and also kind of well, together with a park, but of course no library that I'm aware of. And the typical approach that I see in activity there is people come to the site to do something that's active and do something that's outside, or do something that has to do with the river, or you know, do things that are more physically oriented. And I wonder if, you know, I'd be curious to know how something that seems a little more academic, how those things intersect. I guess I'm a little hesitant without sort of seeing a working model. Maybe the mix is good, but to me, there seems to be some cross purposes with the facility located in a park. I'm a little more head scratchy about it. To me, it seems like it amplifies some of the goodness of what the school is going to become if it's over on College Ave. And from my perspective, putting it there plays the long game. Putting it in Lions Park plays a short game. But I don't know, without seeing an example or two in operation and sort of seeing how that works, it may be an opportunity that, you know, we really want to exploit, because that could be a cool thing.
Maybe Mike, what's the question? The question maybe is then what's our timeline for needing to make a recommendation? Is it something that needs to happen this month?
So, I mean, we could, the thing was because of staffing and we were gonna not have the meeting next month, which would then kick us out to October, and then their board's probably gonna, at the latest, is gonna have to make a decision on that site thing, I would say by November, so the appropriation could get filed. So I mean, hypothetically, this could get punted some. I would just be upfront that definitely at the latest by that October meeting, there would have to be a movement made on the location, and that would be the brick wall deadline.
Well, and maybe if I can speak to the other communities for a moment too, just to kind of give my perspective on that. I specifically grew up in and around the Shoe Park location where there was a library. So as a child in that community, from like 8 to, you know, all the way through high school and beyond. In that specific instance, it was a park that became a hub for activities, for parties, for outdoor music, the kinds of things that that obviously the Hope Lions Park will be. But the cool thing was it all kind of seamlessly blended into library activity as well, because so much of it was youth and kid centric. The draw was, it was just part of what you would do while you were there. You know, if you would go down for an afternoon to hang out at the park, you'd also go cruise to the library and grab a book, which is kind of, I think, the cool thing about it is it's not isolating the library as a library, but it's encouraging it to become just a part of a more natural flow of doing life and activity. Yeah, and so that's to me, that's the big draw, is it's not allowing it to stay within this realm of education and school only. It's drawing it into the more common space and allowing it to be a bit more inclusive and inviting than it might be in that space. Not to say I don't think that would be a bad thing by any means. I think it's an opportunity for it to be something more than it is traditionally.
I had a couple of questions, but what you were just saying makes a lot of sense. Might counter some of my thoughts about that. It makes sense to me, because of that. I'm just wondering in the future plans of Lions Park, like, we'll call it a convention center almost.
Yeah.
Not a hotel, but a center. Are there gonna be, future plans that there might be big events or things like that that might be difficult for the space for not just parking, but just access. And it might be claustrophobic just because people who go to the library, it's not a one-time shop. This is a discipline. This is what they do as a part of their life.
Yeah.
So most of the people who do library stuff, it's a part of their routine. Where they do groceries on Thursday, but on Wednesday we're at the library. So if that's a normal flow, we got $5,000, 5,000 square feet of that. I mean, that could really develop into a very large access. So those big events, I'm wondering if that does have the possibility of being claustrophobic, especially with the area. That would be the only thing for that. Otherwise, I really do get that idea. I have a question about the property.
Yeah.
If we invest and we go into even a collaboration into this building, and you're holding on to the property that has a commercial value to the city for taxes and things like that, what is like if you have a 5,000 square feet area upstairs and downstairs, why are you holding on to the property for? Am I understanding that correctly? Just because you can, or is because that's a value?
Because that was one of the-
hold on to your property, but I just wonder the longer.
Yeah, because could this city, even with the growth of those homes, sustain two sort of library spaces? I don't know.
I don't know, and I mean, to be frank, the main reason why I brought up this Lions Park thing is since we were denied the EDA grant, if we go these other grants as the city, even if we were like, hey, we're gonna hang out with Art Wall and other things, the general responses when I shop in the surround was, oh, well, the city should have like built it itself pretty much or partner with like other people. And we don't have a park district, as we all know, so it fights against police, fire, everything else for current expense. So, I mean, my big concern is if we don't have a larger level partnership, I don't know if it's gonna really push the keel to get the grants to match us in any way. I think with them, it actually adds fuel to the fire because it opens up the library capital from Department of Commerce and a lot of other things where it could potentially match us. So that was the reason I began pondering, well, that and also living in Beaver then, but it's the concern that since we were denied that EDA grant, I think it's going to be a very hard uphill climb otherwise if we're going to be doing this alone. And longer term, that's gonna look really weird to have all that nice new parking and just have that building hanging out. So it worries me a lot.
Mike, I've got sorry, go ahead and finish the thought here. I've got a question.
The board of trustees, we have not developed a long-term vision for that property if we were to join with the city of Palm Trees at Lions Park. The only thing I would say is, it's appropriate to say that we would retain it for value purposes at the moment.
That's smart, but I mean, like, if the area doesn't have, like, if this is huge enough for the area, any developments in the future come because of the success of what's existing. It's much easier to get grants and even bond, whatever it might be in the future, because we have something successfully, but yeah, so that was just, yeah, I get that, but that might be one of those things that might be a concern for a lot.
Understand that we are still sort of at the exploratory stage. The only reason we bring this now, because of the time issue, we probably would not have been making this decision this quickly. So, what we do with Cottage Avenue is really not something that's been fully developed. I am interested as well in fact, yeah, we made the decision to go to land grab. We're weighing the possibilities still, and my concerns also have to do with whether the cons of or rather the control of working with the school district, for instance, outweigh the pros of working with the park district in that land. So it's still something.
And so even if we make this recommendation today, obviously you guys are still considering, and it doesn't mean that you wouldn't still potentially rather move into an agreement with the school district.
That's
Right, okay.
And that is one of the reasons why we wanted to also have a discussion with Mr. Friday and the school district.
Leif, you were gonna say something?
Yeah, I was curious. So I'm looking at the Hillsborough Chute Park Library Google page and looking at the Google comments by people who are using the park. There are 68 reviews. Overwhelmingly, it's really good, but there are a number of insightful comments about the mixing of these two spaces, that it might be beneficial to have members have a look there to see what user perspectives are, because it's polarizing. There are some people who are in love with it. Probably these people have young children who they're trying to feed little bookworms. That's a really good thing. But then there are people also who are more interested in utilizing a library for deeper dives, and they're frustrated. There are also the cross purposes that I was mentioning earlier, where there are people, with loud physical activities coming into a space that's sort of quiet. That's frustrating some people. I would encourage people to check that out, and there may be some other resources to look at. But what I'm curious about is there's some comments in the reviews, the Google reviews, that indicate that the depth of book collection there is very thin. And I'm wondering if there's a way for us to sort of have our cake and eat it too. And Mike, maybe you can comment on this. Would it be possible to develop a library space that would be utilized in some way at the park? And then once we're looking further down the road, the facility near the school, if it was developed as sort of a second stage to what the library is in the park, it would provide us with an opportunity to have libraries in two sites that support each other, sort of a more sort of introductory, sort of less formal format at the park, and then a deeper dive sort of library near the school. Is that a crazy idea, or is that impossible?
No, Leif, that's what I was thinking as well. I was thinking no matter primary area might be, if your primary house for the library is at Lions Park, so to speak, whatever they call it, it's a corner, it's actual, it has furniture, things like that, that has a satellite or a place that is an exhibit over on the place that might be used for a lot of school stuff or whatever. And then vice versa, if you were to flip it over, because let's say if it were over on College Avenue, your main place, it would not be smart for us to have just a Parks and Rec place. It has nothing academic over there. Even the market has some academic features of that. So if you want to grow it on both sides, but you just have to decide one or the other right now. That one might be more of a satellite, and it's just what we've seen it in other universities in different places is they create some marketing structures that you can break down or can be permanent for a while, but then you can actually set up a little place in there. in either spot. So I like that, Leif. But I think that's what we do. We do a lot of long-term conventions and stuff like that, is you sit down for a place for a whole month and people are there and they develop their program, whether it be at a city centers or places like that. In a mall, they've seen it at malls as well. Well, they'll sit down for a whole month and they'll develop their program, and it takes a month because people are on vacation or whatever. But whatever it is, it has to have kind of a marketing space. But I
Well,
like it.
from a funding perspective, Mike, does this get us in any kind of trouble if we were to take it at, the way that I'm suggesting?
I think it's a good idea. The whole thing. The only thing I'm trying to figure out with it, because with the legislative appropriation, it's not like you could typically, when you're asking money, you could basically put in like an address. I mean, we might be able to write it in a way where we have it where like the Lions Park one is an introductory one and the main one is the main one, and try to get money for both. But then that question, I think, would heavily fall on a rural library district board. Is that something they want to entertain? Because I open did this because I wasn't thinking that. I did not have that discussion at all. Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why we're also here is we're interested in getting all the stakeholders in the same room to discuss the vision and the different possibilities that all three entities foresee in the future.
One thing I'll add too, I think I love this idea, you could potentially do this with a whole lot less overhead and expense in the build out. You could create like a youth reading loft up inside where it's not even taking up the full square footage. It doesn't have to have all of the structure of a proper second story, but has an area for kids to be able to stop in and grab books, whatever age groups. It doesn't have to be, but because we're talking about, but just thinking about the comments from Google, that the activity, that kind of surrounds that building obviously is going to draw a certain group, and other people may not be drawn to it. So if you focus it that way, it could be a fairly small actual footprint of the building while still having a big impact in the community. The question then becomes, how does that affect our access to funds, and does it still give the advantage to the city that it needs to make it feasible? And if it does, I think that's a fantastic way to, and then be allow the library to focus on
one site.
on a proper, place to,
It would be like in the bookmobile. Some of you are not like old enough to remember the bookmobile, but we used to use that as, but it's a new way to actually have different places like that. But then you don't have to, good. I'm
Not
younger
that
again.
I mean, we would be with that legislative appropriation form, and naturally they'd have to take this new concept to their library for signing off on, because I had discussed this one the last meeting. But the way you could put it in that legislative appropriation form is potentially you could put both addresses if they were flavored for different uses. So like if they agreed to specifically if the Lions Park one is like a youth one, and then let's say College Avenue is the adult one, as long as it's distinct uses, I think there's a way you could do both on that and not shoot ourselves in the foot. Cause I'm just trying to figure out ways to make this community center thing going, because to make sure the whole Lions Park project wasn't derailed by inflation, I've had to put in and get grants that originally my plan was to put in for the community center. So I'm basically running the till dry as far as hoping to get funds on top of funds without another partner. Now, if we get the library involved, that opens up, to my knowledge, it opens up about 4 other new buckets of funds from the state.
Go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say that, one of the things that interests me about this idea, one is maybe a youth and family sort of element there at Lions. And, you know, I've heard on the radio advertised that, did you know you can check out croquet sets and bocce ball and things, which tie into sort of that family atmosphere, draw families in, young readers in, you know, in about 8 years, ish, we'll be looking at our next school. And what will probably happen is, most likely happen is that entire campus that we're sitting on there on College Ave will become the high school. And so probably 700-800 student high school.
Yeah.
And one of the ideas is whether, if the rural library was next door, if we plan for a library, or we just plan to share the library so that our resources are yours and yours are ours, and we convert the existing space into a maker space and use it for other things. And because of that proximity that we just share, so which then, of course, when you get to high school age kids, becomes adult, you know, reading levels and academic levels, which then makes sense in a lot of ways. And it serves what is going to be 400 homes across College Ave in the foreseeable future. So just another kind of wrinkle to think about.
But the other thing I wanted to add, I think that the way that this affects this board more than any other is that in lieu of this decision, chances are could be some substantial period of time before there were funds available to renovate that building, therefore leaving a very dated piece of property on top of an otherwise beautiful park. And that's what encourages, or, you know, what encourages me more than anything.
Well, I mean, looking at the various grants we've hit up for the current renovation, like if we don't partner with them and then get access to those additional buckets of money, honestly, I think it could, to replace that community center building, I think easily it could put us out a decade. Without question. Because the money I was trying to reserve for that, we've had additional grants, because every time we have Lions Park funded, I get engineers' estimates back, and then it gets very depressing because of how inflation is going. Because I mean, you'll see in the capital facility plan that I have y'all looking at, for that way you could approve it next meeting. I mean, Lions Park project, when we all discussed that, then originally, way back when, we thought it was like 2.5 million, and the cost is like skyrocketed over 5 in the last 6 years. So I mean, that's just the reality of the matter. So,
Well, I would put forward a motion that this board recommends that the city pursue grant funding and planning opportunities with the library for a satellite specific library satellite location within a renovation of the community center building at Lions Park.
and then I would also ask that you also put in the language also for doing the appropriation as well for that permanent branch, because we can list those 2 addresses as long as they're distinct uses, and we'll be submitting that, helping them out through our lobbyist.
I would agree to that as amended, yeah.
Okay. Did you get that whole motion? Okay.
I do like that motion. However, I think our board of trustees is still interested in a conversation before they would agree. to
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure, yeah.
This is
We
just,
map
Yeah.
out the vision.
Yeah.
and funding the-
Yeah,
sure. You don't have to do anything because of this.
yeah.
Do I have a second?
Also.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Okay.
Are we going to, the motion is to just look at additional funding options? Is that what I'm understanding?
Well, yeah, the motion in essence is we're helping to file a legislative appropriation next year, and you have to list out the addresses. And in essence, what this will allow would be the address at Lions Park for a youth thing or something to that effect, and then the address at the property adjacent to the high school for all the remaining other library services. I think I encapsulated. that, I
So,
hope.
so you're looking to see if we can have our cake and eat it too. Is that what I'm understanding? Okay.
Yes. Yep.
So we got a motion and a second, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. So that's, will be the planning work ahead.
And for further communication, Mike, do we come through you?
Through me.
Okay,
Yeah, yep.
but I will take this back to the board and see what type of questions they have next
Okay,
and possibly have a joint meeting.
Yep.
All boards and all.
Yep.
Okay, awesome. And Mr. Frank, off the record, or before we leave, I'll be in touch with you as well to explore
Sure.
additional.
Absolutely. Sure, we can
opportunities
talk
on
about
the other
this.
side.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming. Okay, next, action item, we need to cancel September.
Yeah.
Or that, you're out of town usually for a conference or what's that?
Well, yeah, we just are short staffed, so there's no way to do that.
So I need a motion to, cancel the September 23rd, okay, second?
Second.
Hey, Leif got second to be my here. Been moved in second, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay, reports, Mike, Lions Park update.
Okay, I alluded to this a little bit during the discussion about community center, but got engineer's estimate back as they're in the final stages of engineering, because the goal here is we're gonna get this bid out like it right around Christmas time, so hopefully we get lower bids and can just go full bore on this thing spring and summer. But as I said, it costs roughly near the 5 million, it's over 5 million mark. So what we've done to essentially get some more resources is, luckily, since this has gone another year from this year and next year, you have additional REIT 2 money with it being another year. So there's about another 200,000 there. And then I filed the endowment for the Arts Our Town grant for about another 500,000, which I think we have a good chance of giving. And then I'm hitting up the Portland County for 0.09 funds to finish it out. So we're doing everything to make sure we can do our thing, but that's why I was saying that some buckets of money I was trying to reserve for the community center, because like 0.09, if it's not for an economic purpose, if it's for a park purpose, once you use that, then the agency is precluded from going for a non-economic grant out of that bucket for another decade. So that's why I mentioned we're in our situation. Cultural resources wise, because we got those state grants. That's been the major delay, because when you get the state money, you have to be digging holes all over a park, looking for arrowheads and such. So that is finally wrapped up, and I believe the state has signed off on it. They like sat on it for about 5 months, which has led to some extreme delays, but finally they bothered to get it done, so that's nice. So the plan is that we'll have the final engineering in hand toward the end of the year, get this thing bid out. And then next spring and summer, just go to town. And what that means though is that with the, community center, they'll have access because it's off the park and whatnot, but that park will be very restricted next year, because in order to get this done in a timely manner, we're just outright gonna have to shut it down and just dig up the whole thing and then get out of there. So likely next year, we'll probably have to relocate farmers market. We have outlets at Kiwanis Park, that may work. Yeah, I would say that one would probably work the best, because university has ground on Beta Davis, but there's other restrictions tied to that where it may not be conducive for the farmers market. So we'll try and make do with Kiwanis Park next year. And then we'll have new Lions Park. So we're on the critical pathway, but yeah, inflation's a pain. And that's my report on that. Any questions?
Any possibility of using the high school for the farmers market stuff next year? Think about it, it's a long time.
How,
from now,
is the
but-
first one is in what first week of June or week earlier in May? That's
it is-
last of May.
It's the last Thursday in May is the first one, and then it goes to the last Thursday in September.
Oh, yeah,
Oh, yeah,
we'll
that
run
takes
it,
it.
we'll run it athletics.
Yeah.
What about our garden area? I
Oh.
made a little 90 by 90 garden across the street from the university.
Yeah.
Which is awesome, by the way.
I think we should kick that door every time.
Yeah.
And whether the response, one way or another, we need to let them know.
Yeah,
Teams are part of our
We're,
community.
yeah,
we're gonna be good neighbors, no
Yep.
matter what.
yeah,
And this is what we do.
Yeah.
So, that might be
Yeah.
another option.
Yeah.
It's not too bad with it's not like, especially on the side where all the trees are and they have a lot of like a nice view, gets hot up there. It's not like Lions. But that's another option, but I'm nervous about another park with parking and stuff
yeah,
like that.
sure,
But that one might be okay.
yeah.
That's
Yeah,
another.
that was gonna be my only other question, was just about the park next year, but it sounds like shutdown is inevitable, so something for us to be watching for and planning for next year, but.
Yeah, it's gonna have to be shut, it's
Yeah.
gonna have to be shut down because as part of those grants, we're redoing both the park and lots, so those are gonna be out of the commission, and then
Yeah.
plus. We're putting electrical through a lot of the park, it's just gonna be a nightmare.
Okay.
Otherwise,
It'll be worth it.
The, yeah, this campfire is probably gonna be one of your things on those days, you know?
Yeah.
So, set up. Okay, Bird leaving the city.
yeah,
Sounds like a novel.
yeah, so this is, since this board was one of the initial ones that approved it, so I'd let you know. So their national corporation has essentially redone their strategy about where they want to operate. So actually, we were exceeding all of their targets for a smaller university campus, which is why I was a bit shocked at this, because they just approved like a 3-year extension, and I got an email, and then the email was attached, was like, oh, hey, my bad, we're leaving pretty much. And when I called them, they're basically pulling out of any city that has a small college. They're focusing their resources toward larger markets only. So like Pullman, for example, Seattle and Illinois, like Urbana, Champaign. So I mean, unless you have like a critical mass of like over 30,000 students, it seems like they don't like want to operate anymore. Cause I even mentioned like, hey, if we got Walla Walla to play with you, maybe reconsider. And they said no. So so I'm gonna be trying to reach back around to Lime, because if you all recall years ago, Lime wanted to operate here, but in that instance, they just stopped because Walla Walla like subcommittee to death, and like they got tired of just going through it, so they stopped. But they were interested, so I think it may be an opportunity to engage with them. So that's what we're gonna try to do.
Well, I think you definitely need to get the user data.
Yeah. Oh, I
From
have.
Bird.
Oh, I have it. I mean, the first full year's worth of data, there were over 10,000 rides, which is more than people in the city. So, so very successful.
I would I would have reservations. I mean, I supported the Bird coming in the first place, but I have seen so many examples of activity that I really think don't really help the city much when it comes to Bird. I would want to think through support of another proposal. Not that it's impossible, but from my perspective, it was a good learning experience. But having Bird leave, I am looking for the downside. But it's kind of a cool thing. but their model, there's wreckage of bird scooters strewn everywhere. And either their maintenance process needs to be improved, or the way that their ride philosophy happens, where you drop it pretty much wherever you can jump from the scooter. I would be, maybe there's another model that would work better, but I was kind of disappointed, honestly, but that's just my opinion.
Well, one of the things that I know, Leif, is it did give grant transportation to some who don't have it. It was a convenience. I do think that, I know that Lime does I think a better job of sort of landmarking where exactly they are to be left.
Yeah.
I know from personal experience in Spokane, we tried to leave ours in a particular area and it refused to turn them off. So you keep charging until you find the exact zone, which is a little, small radius area to leave it, and then it'll let you turn it off. So I think if we desire to keep going forward, being really sort of particular, I don't like having 4 bird scooters parked right outside of the high school either. I think that, there's some things that are problematic there. So yeah, I agree. I do see some good that occurred. I saw the college kids run into Andy's up and down pretty regularly, and those are some things. Generationally, these kids don't think anything about throwing their credit card on and spending $4 or $5 to make a round trip to the store. So,
I would add too, I think some of the issues, the growing pains that we experienced had to do with the on the ground local management of them rather than with the bird model. Although I will say having specific locations where they can be dropped is I think a big plus. I think that is one of the issues. But also, I think part of managing that fleet is understanding when you need to go address needs, both in maintaining the scooters more effectively, which they were not. I mean, they were all had bald tires and just looked haggard. And obviously they're not going to be cared for, but they need to be maintained. But also when scooters are left tipped over and stuff, I'm fairly certain that the person managing that fleet would have notifications on that kind of activity and should be addressing it. I will say that Bird was looking for a new fleet manager several months ago. They started advertising for it, started hitting social media and putting through. I'm guessing that may have fallen through. I don't know if maybe there was an issue with the first person that had started that process, but they were looking for somebody else before they pulled back out. So I suspect they probably knew that was an issue too. So I kind of agree in both sides. I think there is a lot of benefit. I think it's fun. It gives something else to do around town and draws people through the main part of town. But I do think that if we were able to find, if Lime had some better controls, I would feel a lot better about it as well. And maybe even the city having a little bit of buy-in when it comes to the relationship with the local management of the assets themselves. That might be a plus as well.
Yeah, checklist for that. I wonder if that's, I don't know, is like when Bird goes and looks for a person who can do on the ground maintenance or management. I don't know if that's they want to just pay $16 an hour for a manager for that, or somebody who has a little bit more ability.
It's a business thing. So
Yeah,
you're getting a percentage, I guess, is what it is. There's no hourly stuff. It's based on performance.
Gotcha.
So the more effectively you manage the fleet, the more money you'll make.
Yeah. So. Sure. No, I was just thinking about the nature of the type of employment that you need to have personally do that. But definitely, even if the city has a to-list checklist that they could hand to a company like that, it's similar like that, and say these are the things that we would like to see, and will help, but because of this.
Yeah.
That gets a little bit weird, but maybe not. Maybe that would be a good way to do it.
Yeah.
It likely went, and I would agree with Jordan. I think a big issue with them was the local management, and the thing was it always rotated. So put in perspective, in the 2.5 years they were here, And they didn't notify me either, so I had to do like sleuthing when we were given business licenses for these like new corporations that were running it. It went through 4 different managers in the 2.5 years.
Oh.
So that was the other big issue. The whole fleet was like basically being hot potatoed all
Yeah.
over the place.
That makes more sense, like, 'cause I know the first gentleman that took it on was
Yeah.
really active on
Yeah.
social media for that
Yeah.
first bit. He was good about posting where they were and what was going on and special deals, and it was great
Yeah.
that first few months. And then it went dark, and that makes sense that they had maybe transferred on to something else
Yeah.
or someone else.
Did they, I don't know much about the organization. Did they have a card that, how did they, I mean, I don't, take time with that. I can find out information about that, but I'm just wondering if they have like students who have cards or they have to use a debit card or how do
Yeah,
they?
you set it up in the app. You put
Yeah,
your
we
name
put it
in,
in the app,
it's
like I
all
got mine.
Yeah, but I'm wondering if there was a, yeah.
Gotcha. Line, my kids. have-
Well, maybe if nothing else, Mike, you kind of know now
Yeah.
what concerns we might have and the things that we would want to ask of a potential future vendor if we were to try to pursue something like this again.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on. Creative district update, Mike.
Yeah, this is just providing an update on that. So we've been working with Downtown Foundation, Walla Walla and Art Walla on this. The Arts Washington people were here this summer to do a preliminary tour of both cities. They thought it qualified well. There was a little bit of back and forth that the initial district was too big, not so much from the 2 corridors, but they wanted it more focused. So it was shrunken down a little bit on both sides to really cover various uses like up into like Lions Park, Larch, College Avenue, the whole area around the university, and then with Walla Walla, they focused a little bit more along Rose and then along downtown because they had theirs going out a ways, and the state didn't like that much. So we've given them the map. They now said that's okay. So we're working through the public outreach process. There's a planning steering committee right now on the Downtown Foundation. They helped write a Sherwood Trust grant just to run the public outreach, because before we finally get accepted, you have to have like a creative district plan that gets approved by the state. So so Downtown Foundation's hiring a facilitator. And then there'll be invites to you all and a lot of other folks for various meetings. It'll be like once a month for the next like 4 months or so. But the goal is that before we get in the new biennium, turn in the application to Arts Washington. Because then if we get accepted, that opens up about 6 buckets of grant money for both jurisdictions, right in time for the new biennium. So that's the critical pathway on that.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Right.
The capital facility plan.
Yeah, this is just for your information. Please look at it. If you have any comments or additions or omissions or edits, let me know. And this will be voted on the next meeting in October. So for those that sat on this body for a long time, what we do is, and for those that don't, what we do is every year citywide, we have capital facility plan that has projects across all departments over $5,000. Year 1 is more set in stone, and then subsequent years are more so for planning purposes, but helps with grants. And then for each project, typically we have our guesstimate for the split and the finances. That way our finance department knows how to plan for it. Yeah, naturally, the heavy lift next year is Lions Park, so we're focusing all of our resources on that, especially the way inflation is going, so we actually get it done. And then the other one, and well, definitely October, we should have a discussion at that meeting about what we want that park to be, but the whole Autumn Meadows Park, because we're finally getting the local improvement district and all that set up. It takes a while when you have a new program, so we're getting the money from them, and then we can figure out what we want to do with the park. And then future years, making some improvements. As y'all know, Veterans Park, we turned in the grant application and that one. And then likewise with Harvest Meadows and some with Kiwanis. But take a look at it, and then if you have us, we can talk at further length the next meeting in October on that. Just because I try to get the various components through all the advisory commissions in October. In early November, so that way council can take action late November. So that way that part of the budget is solid for when they vote on the budget in December.
Okay, forgive me if this came through in one of my million emails, or is it an email or is it on the website?
It's on the website and the email, actually both. Yeah.
Okay, that's all our reports, so, a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
Troy moved. Second. Jordan second, and all in favor? Aye.
Hi.
We are adjourned.
Okay, thanks everyone.
Yeah, thanks, everybody.
Very
Person.
Yeah.
Be recorded.